I've learned that the best founders are always selling.
Welcome to the GTM Vault podcast, hosted by Rick Koleta. We uncover the strategies, the pivots, and the breakthroughs, turning startups into giants. Let's crack, open the vault, and find out how.
Today's guest has sat in every GTM seat, from VP of product to CEO to board member, and now he's leading the charge on PLG and AI-powered growth. Dave Boyce has sold companies to Oracle, Amazon, and Aurea, launched products that reached profitability without a sales team, and teaches the first ever MBA course on product-led growth. He's the executive chairman at Winning by Design, a board member at Forrester, and a trusted advisor to founders building the next generation of SaaS. In this episode, we dive deep into what real PLG looks like, how AI is transforming RevOps and GTM teams, and the new playbooks founders should be running in 2025. Let's get into it. Dave, you've led multiple products to profitability through pure PLG. What are the biggest misconceptions founders have when they try to go PLG?
You're not wasting any time. You're getting right to it. Rick, it's, look, one thing, yes, I've built multiple products. And also one thing we have to understand is everything's changing right now. So I'm going to say some things about like how it's worked in the past, and we're going to talk about how it's working in the future. But, the number one thing for me, I think a lot of founders get it, Rick. Like, I mean, if you think about like right now is like an AI, it's almost like an AI native founding kind of environment. And when I spool up a company, I mean, this was true, when I was founding companies like 15 years ago, but every single platform that you use to spool up your company from Google Docs to HubSpot to Carta to like, it's all self-service. You never talk to any humans when you're spooling up your own company with your own platform. So why would you be building a platform that requires something different that you're selling to your customers? That said, the biggest thing that I've seen is that founders skip the founder selling mode. They're like, hey, I'm going to build a self-service product. Yeah, cool. I'm going to make it really easy to discover and use. Yeah, amazing. And therefore I will never have to sell. Wrong. You actually will have to sell. Like your first few users, and you're going to sell. You're going to be the number one salesperson, the number one kind of customer support person, the number one. You're going to be learning and tuning along the way, and you're going to put your own human self into the mix to understand and develop empathy for those customers. So you can't skip that part. You can't just build it and then wait for the customers to show up. Even if you have great mechanics, you actually have to get into the conversation.
What's the difference between a PLG motion and a PLG company? Can you have one without being the other?
You can try. You can try. I mean, the thing about PLG is it's a mindset. It's a mindset. It's a mindset that embraces weird things like empathy and generosity. So yes, you can, mechanically you can build a PLG motion inside of a non-PLG company, but if you do it right, if you're really developing empathy for your customers and you're really understanding what their job to be done is, and you're really kind of meeting them where they are with generosity, like, hey, that's the problem you're trying to solve. Cool. Take this. All right. What do I owe you? Nothing. When do I pay you? Never. That's the PLG ethos. And once it takes hold in your company, it will also make the rest of your company better. Let's say you have a second go-to-market motion that's sales-led. That can also be empathetic and generous. Just because there's humans involved doesn't mean we have to extract our humanity. We still want to be empathetic and generous, whether the product is leading, whether AI is leading, or whether humans are leading.
When does it make sense to layer sales onto PLG, and what does it kill momentum? When does it kill momentum?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great problem to have, Rick. I've got momentum on PLG. Amazing. That's hard to do. That takes months and years of iteration to get kind of momentum on PLG. So you definitely do not want to kill that momentum once you get it. Because you worked really hard for it. You iterated your way into it. Two things. One is, there will be a point where your growth rate starts to attenuate, and you're going to want to prepare for that, and you're going to want to add some sales assist in. But I don't like going too early. Like if everything is up and to the right and I've got acquisition, activation, and monetization all working, I've got good renewal characteristics and I've got momentum and my ARR stack is going, I'm only going to add a sales assist motion kind of when I start to see the growth attenuate or when when I'm like, that is really stable. I'm up to $10 million in ARR and I can afford to then go put my creative energy on putting a sales assist motion on top of it without messing up what I'm already doing. The main thing I see is going too early. And usually you go too early because you're getting pressure from all sorts of outside forces. Like your VCs are like, hey, if we can do, if we can sell the name brand customers, why wouldn't we? If we could sell $1 million contracts, why wouldn't we? One of my other companies over here did this. I would resist that until you feel like you really have a solid foundation under you and kind of 10 million or more of ARR. And then you can afford to go iterate your way into a next GTM motion.
What are the critical early indicators that a PLG motion is working or failing even before revenue shows up?
That is a really, really critical question. And we get impatient, right? Like we want the revenue, but like that's our scorecard. That's our y-axis. Hey, where's ARR on my y-axis? No. The first thing that's going to show up is usage retention. The very first thing that's what I like to optimize for first. So have I developed a solution to a problem that humans have that is so compelling that they'll keep coming back and coming back and coming back? If I can retain their usage, retain their attention, now I got something. Dollars will follow, but they're not going to come back and log into something that doesn't deliver any impact. They are going to come back and log into something that is delivering impact. So once I have that right, and I can measure usage retention on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, I don't have to wait for a year, and I certainly don't have to wait for a monetization event. That's what I track first.
You've launched dozens of products. How has your GTM playbook changed in the AI plus PLG era?
Well, it's faster, Rick. It is faster. You can prototype faster. You can launch MVPs faster. All of the kind of initial stack for putting a product together and measure and monitoring patterns like usage patterns, they're all pre-integrated. And a lot of that is AI facilitated. Embrace all of the AI native GTM tactics, like all of them, and think in days and weeks, not months and quarters. Almost anything can be made So that's number one, faster. Number two, almost anything can be made self-service. Like you say, hey, my product's too complicated. Really? Is it? Could it be explained through some sort of a generative AI agent or bot, chat agent or voice agent or help agent? Probably could. I could probably smooth over some of the complicated pieces of onboarding with AI. So almost anything can be made self-service these days. So faster, more self-service. And then the third thing is like, don't pay a human to do something that a robot could do. Like in the age of AI, we can task robots with doing almost any piece of the GTM motion. And why would I pay a human to do something that a robot could do? Humans are amazing and they can uniquely handle certain things. So let's have the humans do those things and let's have the robots do the things that are scalable, repeatable, and mechanical.
Your all-in-one AI-assisted GTM. What's one workflow every SaaS team should be automating today, but still isn't?
I love the way you phrase that. Every SaaS team, Rick, every SaaS team has a renewal, every SaaS team. And that renewal assumes I already have a contract. I already have contract terms. I already have a configured application with features I've already deployed because I already did the work to get the initial kind of year worth of usage in place. And now all I'm trying to do is extend that into the next year. Automate the renewal. It's simple. You don't have to do anything other than just allow the customer to re-accept the terms. I don't have to renegotiate the terms. I don't have to reestablish anything. I don't have to reconfigure anything. Automate the renewal. As soon as you get automated renewals, then you're going to get hooked on automation. You can go to the next pieces of GTM automation.
And this applies to enterprise as well, right? Not
Totally.
just low-end SaaS. So that
I can automate SAP renewal, like the most complicated software in the world. I went through all the pain of getting it established. Now all I got to do is automate it.
Absolutely. Your definition of a GTM engineer, what is it? And why do you think they're replacing traditional RevOps?
Okay, so for listeners, Rick pre-sent me some of these questions, so I thought about this a little bit. I am skeptical of how we talk about GTM engineers.
Okay.
I mean, I love the concept as far as it goes, but I don't love how far it goes. I almost think sometimes in the public discourse, we kind of say, remember a growth hacker? Well, now it's called a GTM engineer. And we're going to go find the clever ways to, to spool up clay on some piece of our GTM motion. And we're going to call ourselves GTM engineers and we're going to lean into these arbitrage opportunities. I think that's all great. But against what playbook, against what architecture, against what kind of unifying theory of the case? I want a GTM architect and then a GTM engineer to go execute the pieces of that. I want to understand what is the customer journey beginning to end? Where does growth come from? How does growth compound? And I've hired GTM engineers and growth hackers before who don't have any theory of the case, and they're just running fast after whatever the next shiny object is. That's not a stable growth architecture. What I want is someone who can do both. I want to lay down a really stable kind of measurement framework bedrock, and then I want to go run experiments on top of it. So I would think about GTM architecture as much as I would think about GTM engineering.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because everything boils down to the architecture and the foundation, right? If you're using a certain suite of tools, bringing in some GTM engineer to kind of come in and change things it's going to mess up the alignment amongst the teams to begin with. Maybe taking a few steps back and starting off with the architecture, then
Yeah.
um,
And Rick, when I say architecture, I'm not necessarily saying technical architecture. I mean, that factors in, but it's really my information architecture of how do I track a customer from awareness to activate, acquisition, activation, monetization, renewal, expansion, referral. How do I track all of that? What is it and then how does growth, and now and how do I measure it? And now I can run experiments. Once I know how to measure, if I'm running experiments without measurement, they're useless. But if I can run experiments against measurement, not only in their own silo, but against the whole growth architecture, now I can really to your point, I'm not going to mess that up by running experiments with a GTM engineer if I've laid down that bedrock.
And if you were building a modern GTM stack from scratch today, what 3 AI native tools would be foundational?
Boy, there's a lot of this depends on the type of company you're building. I mean, I would certainly not. Anthropic just announced last week that they're up to 90% of their code being written by their own agents. 90%. 90%. That is crazy. I really want to get in there and see that. But, I certainly don't want to be at 10% of writing my own code. So I definitely would be leveraging AI in engineering. I definitely would be for integrations, for raw code generation, for documentation, QA, test harness, all of that I would do with AI. In terms of GTM stack, which is I think the question that you asked, I would kind of depends on what motion I'm running, but almost all the companies that I work with are on the early stages are using HubSpot, and HubSpot just did a native integration with OpenAI, which is amazing. So now I can, if I'm running a GTM stack, no matter what my motion is, but especially if I'm having conversations with customers. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, I can use OpenAI to analyze that entire kind of customer journey like we were talking about, which is great. Then I want a note taker. So this is not necessarily for PLG. If it's PLG, my signal's going to come from somewhere else like Heap or Amplitude or a mixed panel. So I definitely want to track kind of engagement, and I want that to be all interrogable against that customer journey architecture. If I'm having conversations, I want a note taker. I want a note taker listening in on every conversation, transcribing it, normalizing it to some sort of a framework like Spiced. And then I want that to be interrogable too, which OpenAI makes possible if you're on HubSpot. So that kind of signals at the bottom, interrogability with kind of OpenAI or some other tool. There's other note takers have their own interrogation tools, and then kind of HubSpot to make it all fit into a end-to-end customer journey would be a place to start. There's lots of other stuff. It depends on the motion you're running.
What are the risks of over automating early stage GTM, and how do you balance speed with signal?
No risk, but like we said before, I don't ever want a human to do something that a robot could do. That being said, I think the key word you said is speed. If I'm just heads down trying to automate every single thing and I never ship, that's a problem. And I never talk to anyone, that's a problem. I never get a feedback loop on learning, that's a problem. Eventually, I want to automate everything, and I don't think there's any risk to that. But if it means that I'm staying in my cave and not shipping because I don't have it fully automated and fully perfect, that's a problem. And if it means that I'm not talking to customers, that's a problem. Like if I'm excusing myself from actually developing human-to-human empathy with my end users, that's a problem. So really, there is almost no moat left, Rick, other than speed. So I just want to go fast. And in my wake, let's say I discover that formula ABC is working on a GTM basis, like this kind of content with this kind of ICP, with this kind of call to action and this kind of onboarding flow, that's working. Cool. As soon as I know it's working, boom, I want to automate that and move on. Then I want to go find the next thing that's working. Boom, I want to automate that and move on. I don't want to keep people powering things forever. And there's no risk of over automating as long as I'm only automating the stuff that works.
How do you see AI transforming customer success and onboarding in a PLG world?
So a lot of onboarding super critical. That time to first impact, that initial experience that you have, you all your hopes and dreams from reading the marketing copy, cool, try it now, you click the button. From that moment until you get first impact is a really, really critical part of the journey. And we see most of the seeds of a successful kind of long-term retention and expansion cycle planted right then. Same thing with the seeds of defection or loss of interest, or I can't get first impact before I lose their attention. AI can really help there, especially with complex product. I've seen some instances, Rick, where in the old world where my product is complicated enough that I need to give the customer a vision of what could happen. So I'll literally insert a video before they start launching the product, and that video will get in their head like, oh, that looks easy enough. Now I can start. But AI can do a lot of that work for me too. It can walk me through an interactive demo. It can help me do steps 1, 2, 3 of a configuration. It can ask me a few natural language questions and then boom, show me a draft version of the website I was trying to build or the report I was trying to build. So AI can get me to that kind of place where I'm envisioning myself as successfully using the product or even actually successfully using the product faster.
I had a customer recently. I was doing GTM alignment for them. And one of the first kind of areas that I identified as needs work was only one of the personas was really engaged with using the platform, even though they had glided upstream. They had multiple stakeholders involved with the platform, but usage, it was just so low across the board, except for one of the personas. So, and then I realized the onboarding was just standard for all of the different personas. Someone with this job title is not going to want to use this platform. And if they had a personalized onboarding process and every time they open the platform, it prioritized the features that they most were going to use the platform for, then increase the usage. And my question to you is this.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible nowadays to prioritize this, considering it's such a crucial component of the whole acquisition journey, right? Onboarding it's even done until the aha moment or some value is derived, right? So do you think it's possible to start incorporating that from day one, opposed to, we finally figured out our low-end SaaS where we've started to glide upstream. Now let's throw this extra experiment into the mix to increase usage of other stakeholders within the platform?
Yeah, it's possible. Well, if I understand the question right, I do think it's important to get it right for that first persona first. Like being on average, having an average set of value propositions and an average, collection of features for the average customer with the average job to be done. That's not real. None of that exists. There is no such thing as an average customer who's going to use average features. There's a specific persona, and you found one in that company who had a specific job to be done, and they were actually really succeeding at it. So I want to find that. And then once I've found that, then I want to go find the next one and optimize for her. And then I want to go find the next one and optimize for her. And the thing I got to be careful about is I do want to go for the center of the bullseye in terms of my target market. Like if mostly what I'm going after is creative, like graphic designers, great. Let me figure out where they work. Let me figure out what their job to be done is, and let me meet their needs. If the secondary person I'm going for is a marketer who just has to get up kind of simple designs in place, but that's a really big kind of market, maybe I have a different onboarding, flow for her. And if my tertiary one is somebody sitting at home who wants to, do a poster for their kid's school or whatever, okay, great. That's probably a different onboarding flow, but I want to take them one at a time.
You've helped scale companies at 50% growth rates and also had to restructure teams. What's the signal to pull back versus double down?
Where were you when I needed you to ask this question? Wh- um, Anyone in our seats, Rick, is an optimist. That's why we're doing what we're doing. We're leaning into the future. We're like curious. We're intellectually curious. We're also willing to deploy energy against hard problems more so than your average person. So often when we run into obstacles, we just treat them as something that we got to overcome. And that's a great thing. But once in a while, those obstacles that we're really trying to overcome are intractable, or or it's something that, I had a mentor who once told me, like, Dave, I've been working on this company for like a year. If I can just tell from the way you're talking to me, it feels like you feel like you're pushing a rock up a hill. I was like, yeah, I feel like I'm pushing a rock up a hill. He's like, that's not how it should feel. Like, and the answer when you're pushing a rock up a hill is not push harder. You got to look for water flowing downhill. You'll know it when you see it. So, at some point, Rick, when it feels like you're pushing a rock up a hill and just you've tried everything, you've deployed all your creative energy, and like, you know what? Let me work on a different surface or a different problem or let me see if I can get to where water's flowing downhill. Because as soon as I got water flowing downhill, now all of the challenges are about growth and about acceleration and about extending kind of that success versus just continuing to struggle against that problem that's just, for whatever reason, it's intractable. And you can feel it. I don't have like a metric, but you can feel it. You know when you're fighting against the tide and it's time to try a different tack.
What separates a great GTM leader from an average one in today's world of lean teams and AI leverage?
I just came back from 2 weeks of working with private equity CEOs and CROs and CPOs. And related to your questions at the top around AI, the number one thing that we all agree with is that what got us here is not going to get us there. Let's say I'm a successful kind of, second time, third time executive or founder. Whatever got me to this level of success, the game has changed going forward. We're watching tools like Lovable and Replit and Cursor grow to 10, 20, 50, 100. I think we just heard last week, 500 million in revenue with teams of like 30 or 50 people. That is a completely different playbook than the one that I learned as I was coming up. Completely different. So if I want to be a successful GTM leader today, I got to get that in my head. Like, what got me here is not going to get me there, which means the job is not management. The job is not running the playbooks that I learned in my current, in my past company, running them in this company. That is not the job. The job is architect. Like, I got to figure out what is the appropriate GTM motion that's going to work. And that's going to take some experimentation, which means as a GTM leader, even though I've already learned how to do this, even though I've already become successful, even though I've already proven myself, quote unquote, I got to go back to curiosity, roll up my sleeves, start running experiments, and figure out how I'm going to compete with the AI native companies that are redefining the game.
As a board member at Forrester, what trends are you seeing in how enterprise buyers approach PLG products?
So this will not surprise you, and Forrester's published research on this, that the information asymmetry has flipped. It used to be that sellers knew more about their product than their buyers. Now buyers know more about the product than even the sellers who are selling it. Because we as buyers can get information way more reliably. We can go right into any of the generalized models with Claude or OpenAI. We can ask for a comparison table of the product I'm considering, plus its 3 top competitors. I can find things like reviews and pricing and timed implementation and use case appropriateness. I can find all that out as a buyer, probably more efficiently than in the conversation with the seller. So, that's a trend, and I just got to embrace it, that the buyer is going to have more information than me. The buyer is going to get that information from lots of places that are not me, and the buyer is going to control the purchase process, not me. So as soon as I can embrace that as someone bringing something to market, what I really want to do is pave those paths. Like those are paths worn in the grass because the buyer's going to her network to get information. The buyer's going to Gen AI tools to get her information. The buyer's going to review sites to get her information. So rather than try to stop her from doing that and bring her back into my controlled process, that ain't going to happen. Let me just go pave the paths that she's already traversing and make it easier for her to get information from her network. And so I'm going to create communities. I'm going to create information. I'm going to build heroes. I'm going to build stories. I'm going to build an information network. I'm going to lean into LLMs. I'm going to make sure that all of those sources have full access to the information about my product that I want out there. So I'm actually going to lift the gates and get my information out there rather than trying to close the gates and control information.
And when you work with clients, Dave, how do you kind of incorporate the product team there to come in and build in, say, viral loops into the product to help with that growth?
Yeah. So for a larger company, the biggest unlock, Rick, is the creation of a growth team. So the first, and this is it sounds a little crazy because as startups, a startup is a growth team. It's got an engineer and a marketer and an analyst and a UX designer, like all on the same team, all working on the same thing. But when you get big, those people end up getting siloed. The engineers are over here, the product managers are over there, designers are over there, the marketers are over there. And they're all kind of working on their little piece of the puzzle. As soon as you can kind of peel off kind of a small team of like 5 to 8 people that includes a marketer and an engineer on the same team, that's a growth team. That can now iterate really fast. That can iterate fast against growth objectives. And now instead of that team having the objective that the engineer is used to, which is essentially I got to ship, one story this week against my kind of, story points in Jira. Like, no. The objective is I got to go get activation rate from 7.5% to 8.5%. Create a growth team that has marketing and product and engineering all on the same team. And then I start giving them GTM objectives, like actual business objectives. That unlocks a whole bunch. And it's hard to do because big companies, even kind of 20 million and above companies, may not be operating that way, but as soon as you do it, unlocks a lot.
You teach the first MBA level course on PLG. What case study or concept gets the strongest reaction from your students?
Here's the thing, Rick. So these students are in their 20s and early 30s, mostly late 20s, and they're just humans, just like you and me. And they experience products just like you and I, and they buy products just like you and I. So, they all have Slack, they all have Zoom, they all have Canva, they may or may not have DocuSign, but they've probably used Lovable, or they have experience with the real world. And then they have Instagram and all sorts of consumer kind of apps as well. They know that self-service is a thing, and they know that freemium is a thing, and they know that free trials is a thing. What they haven't done is kind of translate that into the business world. But what's happening is those people are going to have jobs. They're going to work for GM or Ford or Dell or Microsoft, in 1 year. And then a year later, they're going to be evaluating tools and purchasing tools and bringing tools into their company. They're not going to forget that they're humans. And sometimes when we go into an MBA program, I did an MBA, we're like, ooh, in my personal life, I'm a human. In this life, I'm a robotic kind of, steely-eyed business professional. No, that's not right. So as soon as I get them connecting the dots and I show them case studies like Dropbox or a DocuSign or even HubSpot, a lot of them have experience with HubSpot and how did HubSpot introduce PLG into their go-to-market motions. They're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's how I buy software. That's how I experience the world. Now we're just paving that over and making it easier for customers to be humans and solve their problems with the self-service kind of, oh, that makes a ton of sense. And then we tie it into that measurement layer so that they can kind of measure it and monitor it and run experiments against an information architecture that's pretty robust. Like, whoa, this is all like making sense to me. And then we give them case studies with kind of progressive disclosure data for a certain company that was iterating their way into the future. And these students just start being like, ooh, I can see the patterns. Like, this is great. I'm going to optimize this thing. We're going to unlock something. Ooh, it worked. That's great. Now let's go. Ooh, it didn't work. Let's try something different. So I put them into the shoes of the kind of the growth engineer, as we were talking about, like a growth architect, and I just let them go. And as soon as they have that fundamental understanding, they take to it like a fish to water.
You've sold 5 companies and advised many more. What's one GTM pattern you consistently see in successful exits?
Scalability, Rick. Repeatable processes that scale. So I have been involved in companies that have gotten away with not being scalable. Like, every deal's a snowflake. Every set of contract terms are custom. Every deliverable has a lot of customization. But that doesn't happen anymore. I don't see that happening anymore. Like, the companies that are successfully exiting are building a scalable, repeatable machine against a large TAM where I can just kind of, turn the crank on something that is going to continue to scale. If I run out of customers, that's a problem. If too much kind of customization is required for every single customer acquisition, that's a problem. If too much kind of time and attention is required to keep renewals flowing or to keep expansions going, that's a problem. So I want something that just works every time, center of the bullseye, or not every time. I want something that I can do the same thing every time and it will work 70% of the time. If I can find that formula, it will scale.
Hey, Dave, so you've published a book called Freemium on PLG, product-led growth. Tell me more.
Yes, Rick, it's been a lot of work, like just trying to figure out those patterns of success, interview successful entrepreneurs, talk to people who added PLG later. They started in one way and then they added PLG later, talk to people who are PLG from the beginning. And it even leans into some of these trends with AI unlocking more and more self-service within our go-to-market motion. So yeah, the book's called Freemium. It's coming out from Stanford University Press in August, but it's available for pre-order right now anywhere that you buy books.
Amazing. So for everyone out there, is there a website we could go to, Dave, to pre-order?
Well, if you go to my Substack, productledgtm.com, I have all the links, but from Waterstones, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Target, like anywhere you buy books, you can just search Freemium and it'll come up.
That was a masterclass in modern go-to-market. Dave doesn't just talk PLG and AI, he's built it, scaled it, and teaches it to the next generation of software leaders. If you're a founder or GTM operator navigating lean growth, this is one of those episodes to revisit and study. Full episode playbooks and more at gtmvault.wiki. And if you want early access to exclusive frameworks and tools from guests like Dave, join GTM Vault Pro. See you in the next one. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you so much, Rick. It was fun.
Tech founders and VCs, careers, lessons, GTM.